Hello everyone and welcome to today's video. Now today I'm going to be talking about the Overwatch League Summer Showdown tournament results, which obviously just happened. But before we get into that, let's talk about the standings because the standings are very interesting. Because the playoffs is coming out very soon. I think it's coming out in October if I remember correctly. So we're currently in September. I think it's going to be in October. The playoffs is obviously the biggest thing that every team is looking at. So, obviously, I think I already talked about this in the last video on Overwatch, but I just want to mention it quickly again. So, for the West region, the top 6, I think, would just get, like, I don't know, maybe, like, an immediate, like, into the playoffs. I think the 7th to 10th will be a play-ins. So, automatically in the playoffs are the San Francisco Shock, the Dallas Fuel, and the LA Gladiators after that. Even with a horrible performance in the Summer Showdown, they have still advanced themselves, luckily, after winning those two tournaments. Behind them, Houston Outlaws, London Spitfire, Toronto Defiant, Atlanta Terrain, and the Florida Mayhem. All those teams are currently locked into the playoffs, but they'll either be either in the top 6 or in the play-ins 7th to 10th. Any other teams still have a chance, that being the Washington Justice, the Boston Uprising, the Vancouver Titans, the NYXL, and the Paris Eternal. For the East, the Shanghai Dragons and the Seoul Dynasty have locked themselves into the playoffs. Hangzhou Spark and the Philadelphia Fusion are locked in via the play-ins, so they are basically in the playoffs, but they're either 4th through 6th or even in 3rd place. And then behind them, who still has a chance, that being the Chengdu Hunters, the Guangzhou Charge, and the LA Valiant. So let's now have a look at the results. And firstly, here are the teams. Obviously, this is just a reminder of all the teams. So we got from the West region, we got the Dallas Fuel, the San Francisco Shock, the Houston Outlaws, the Toronto Defiant, the London Spitfire, the Vancouver Titans, Washington Justice, and the Florida Mayhem. For the East, we have the Shanghai Dragons, Seoul Dynasty, Guangzhou Charge, and the Philadelphia Fusion. And this is the bracket for the West, and later we'll have a look at the East. So the West. So for the upper bracket quarterfinals, first we actually have the Dallas Fuel versus the Washington Justice. So it's actually a reverse sweep for the Dallas Fuel against the Washington Justice. Hadn't got MVP. And this is also, I think this is also the first match with the home crowd. So that was very interesting to watch, and a great way to start off the weekend, being a reverse sweep from the Dallas Fuel and a very close game as well between these two teams. Next up, the London Spitfire versus the Toronto Defiant, and obviously the home team could not win against the Spitfire. Sparker got the MVP. Pretty convincing win as it looks like from the next 3 matches. Obviously, Ilios is pretty convincing for the Defiant, but the Spitfire does close it out and win against the Defiant. Next up, the Vancouver Titans versus the San Francisco Shock. This is basically, I guess, like a flashback or nostalgia from back in 2019, and say in Season 2, when obviously the Titans and the Shock were basically rivals. They were going up against each other a lot during the finals of every playoffs. This time the Shock gets the winning against the Titans. It was actually pretty close as I was expecting. A lot closer than I was expecting. I can't speak right now, but the Shock does get the win, and Kilo is MVP. And finally, the Houston Outlaws versus the Florida Mayhem, a very convincing 3-0 victory for the Houston Outlaws against the Florida Mayhem, and Pelican got MVP. Lower bracket round 1, we got the Washington Justice versus the Toronto Defiant. It was the hometown team, the Toronto Defiant, winning that against the Justice, a 3-1 victory for them, and although he gained MVP. Next up, the Florida Mayhem versus the Vancouver Titans, and it was the Florida Mayhem winning that, a very convincing 3-0 victory for the Mayhem. It was actually pretty close at Pariso. I think that's how you say the name. I think Pariso. I'm not too sure. Checkmate gets MVP, so pretty close game though. But I mean, disappointed though for the Titans. I mean, they were really competitive against the Shock, and then they just kind of fell off against the Mayhem. Upper bracket semifinals, we have the Dallas Fuel versus the London Spitfire, and it was the Dallas Fuel winning that one against the Spitfire. Sparkle getting MVP, not Sparker, even though I bet those two players' names were very confusing for the cast, as being Jaws and Necra. I think did I say his name? Was it Necra maybe? I'm not too sure. I apologize. But Sparkle gained MVP over Sparker. Next up, the San Francisco Shock against the Houston Outlaws, and it was the San Francisco Shock winning that one against the Outlaws, and Proper gained MVP. Pretty convincing win as well for the Shock, even though it was really close on Hollywood. Next up, for the lower bracket quarterfinals, we have the Outlaws versus the Defiant, and once again, the hometown team is currently on a roll. Pretty competitive 3-0 victory for the Defiant. A tie actually in Hollywood, and three actually very convincing rounds to close out the game. So it wasn't that close, but the Hollywood one was very close in Twilight gained MVP. Next up, a very close victory here for the Florida Mayhem against the London Spitfire. Another reverse sweep actually in this tournament. Obviously, it was against the Spitfire now for the Mayhem, and it was Hydra gained MVP for this match. For lower bracket semifinals, oh my, the Toronto Defiant are actually good now. Toronto Defiant gets to win against the Florida Mayhem, 3-2 victory for them. And Chorong, actually don't know how to say his name. I'm pretty sure it's Chorong, gained MVP. Upper bracket final, we have a 3-0 victory for the Dallas Fuel against the San Francisco Shock. I don't know why Lemmy Kiwi's displayed as Australian. She's not, she's Canadian. But I am going to guess that the Dallas Fuel is the Shock's kryptonite. Because the Fuel had been an absolute nuisance for the Shock. But they did win against their hometown team, the Defiant, in the lower bracket final to verse the Dallas Fuel again in the grand final. A 3-1 victory for the Shock, and Cluj gained MVP. And finally, for the grand final, a very convincing 4-0 victory for the Dallas Fuel. Hadn't been gained MVP, and the San Francisco Shock has to once again settle for second place. Just let you remind you, the Shock have not won a tournament this season, so pretty difficult, I must say, for the Shock. Let's now have a look at the East, and it was a pretty challenging. I'll say very challenging and very entertaining bracket. I'll say. First up, the Shanghai Dragons versus the Guangzhou Charge was a very easy 3-0 victory for the Shanghai Dragons, and Who Are You gets the MVP. Seoul Dynasty versus the Philadelphia Fusion. It was almost a reverse sweep actually for the Fusion, but the Dynasty closes that out on Oasis, and Stalker gets MVP. Next up, for the lower bracket semifinals, a 3-0 victory for the Philadelphia Fusion against the Guangzhou Charge, and MM3 gets the MVP. Upper bracket final, another pretty convincing 3-0 victory for the Shanghai Dragons against the Seoul Dynasty, and Lip gets MVP for that match. Lower bracket final, a Seoul Dynasty victory once again against the Philadelphia Fusion. This time not that convincing. This time, Stalker again MVP once again, and they move themselves into grand final against the Shanghai Dragons once again. A pretty back and forth game, I must say, for the Dragons and the Dynasty. But also Shanghai Dragons winning that one and becoming the Summer Showdown champions alongside the Dallas Fuel. And Lip once again gained MVP. Now these two teams have been very neck and neck. Obviously, if you saw the standings, you'll see that they're actually both on the same points. So if we go back over here, same points, 20 points. But what separates them is the map record: 15-3 for the Shanghai Dragons, 14-4 for the Seoul Dynasty. So basically, they need to hope in the next match the Dragons loses and the Dynasty wins if you're a Dynasty fan. Let's have a look at Week 21 matches, actually. And speaking of that, there it is. That is the most important one. That is a very important match this week for Week 21, which will start in a couple days' time. I think when does it start? It starts in a week. So the team still has a lot of time to practice, get a lot of strats in. There's probably gonna be maybe a bit more patches, and hopefully as well. I think on October, I think during the playoffs, I think we'll actually get Overwatch 2 fully released, which I'm really excited about, and I will be playing that game when it comes out. Some games to probably look out for Week 21, maybe even for the whole Summer Showdown. Actually, if I think about it, bullet ones maybe look out for. The Toronto have been looking really good, so maybe expect some really good wins. Maybe on this one, especially Toronto versus the Shock, that might be really good. What other ones are there? I think any matches with the Seoul Dynasty or the Shanghai Dragons, that'll be really important as well. Maybe even for like maybe for like any of the other teams who haven't locked themselves into the playoffs. That might be really interesting. Gladiators and Titans, that might be a good match as well. If we keep looking, Spitfire Titans, maybe that might be good. Shock Washington, I don't know about that. Maybe Mayhem and Uprising, that might be a pretty good match. Week 23, nothing really much here. Shock and Rain might be good. Fuel and Spitfire. Spitfire and Gladiators maybe as well. What are the ones? Valiant and Chengdu, that might be interesting. And also, it's also worth to mention that week 23 as well, along with all these matches, we're actually going to have the Battle of Texas once again, hosted by the Dallas Fuel at Esports Stadium at Arlington. So they'll be hosted by the Dallas Fuel for the Battle of Texas. I think this might be the second Battle of Texas, I think, this season. I might actually be wrong with that. But we have not seen a lot of Battle of Texas throughout this year. And then here's the final week matches as well. So that's really about it for today's video. Congratulations to the Dallas Fuel and the Shanghai Dragons for winning in their respective regions in the Summer Showdown. And let's move over to now the Countdown Cup as we make our way to the playoffs in October. I think it's October. Yes, it is definitely October. Okay, cool. So that's really about it for me. Hope you guys enjoyed it. Catch you guys all next time. Into the next one. Goodbye.